Joining us here on Radio Row at the 2017 ACC Football Kickoff is the president and CEO of the Chick-Fil-A Peach Bowl, Gary Stokan. Gary, good morning.
Good morning, guys.
How are you? I mean,
doing great.
Gay number 2. I mean, this ACC media stuff, it's fantastic. This conference has really transcended itself. I mean, everyone talks SEC, but ACC is right there now, especially with Clemson winning the national championship.
Well, you think about it. Last year, the ACC was 10-4 against the SEC and 4-1 in bowl games against the SEC. So, in our game this year with the Chick-fil-A Kickoff game that we're calling the GOAT game, the first game with Florida State, Alabama, Alabama's got more wins than anybody since 2010, 86 wins. But right behind them is Florida State with 78. So there's no doubt about it that I think the ACC coaches have elevated the programs. And I think you're seeing the same thing on the opposite of the SEC. On their basketball, they're elevating their coaches, and I think their basketball is getting better. ACC basketball is unbelievable, Hall of Fame coaches, and I think that's where it starts. You got to have great coaches to build a program rather than a team, and ACC has done that now in football over the last 3, 4, 5 years.
I know you're calling this kickoff game the GOAT. Are you privately rooting for it to be, honestly, maybe a 1-2 matchup?
Most definitely, yeah. In 1983, Nebraska played Penn State, and in 1986, Oklahoma played UCLA. Those were both number 1 against number 4. So in the 149-year history of college football, if we get number 1 against number 2 or 1 against 3, this will be the greatest opener of all time. So, it's a claim that, is not a hyperbole. It's certainly the facts. And so, yeah, we're rooting for 1 and 2 or 1 and 3.
Now, I know you don't have to be Albert Einstein to figure out the Florida State and Alabama's great matchup, but how do you guys go about choosing the teams that you put in the opener? I mean, because you got to do it so far in advance, right, and you really don't know what the rankings are going to be, but you guys always seem to come up with a marquee matchup for that first game.
Well, my wife calls me a beautiful mind because in my office at my house, I have the recruiting rankings, believe it or not. I have the coaches' contracts, how long their contracts last. I have the schedules of the teams. And, whether it's a Pac-12, Big 12, or Big 10, because they have 9 conference games, whether they're 4 at home and 5 away or 5 at home and 4 away, to see if they're going to have one game available. You do the research, number 1. Then you take a look at, okay, projecting ahead, who do you think, what program is going to have the best success, which starts with a quarterback and a coach, right? And then you talk to a lot of people. You talk to a lot of ADs and coaches. In this case, the Alabama-Florida State matchup, I talked to Jimbo in 2010 when he got the job and said, I'd like to have you at some point. He said, wait till I get my recruits in and my system and my process in place. They won the championship, national championship in 13. I talked to him in 13. I said, I've got Nick Saban in Alabama in 17. He said, we're ready. And so we scheduled the game. Now, they're both friends, both grew up in West Virginia, both coached together at LSU, won a national championship. Sometimes friends don't want to play friends. So there's all kind of variables that come into play, but you just have to talk to a lot of ADs and coaches, and throughout that time you make a match. And in this case, we certainly didn't know they'd be number 1 and 2, but we knew we'd have a good game because they were both building programs. And I give them a lot of credit for wanting to play against each other in a game like this because they want their programs to compete at the highest level. And to do that, you have to play in games like this.
You mentioned how kind of like when you were talking to Jimbo, it was kind of like you were pitching yourselves, but then obviously at the same time, he was pitching himself back to you by saying, we need a couple years from it. Do you find teams now pitching themselves to you?
Yeah.
And is there some, and not to mention any schools, but is there sometimes that schools that pitch to you that you're like, there's probably never a scenario that you're going to play in this game?
No, I don't think that. But to your first point, I had somebody last week from the ACC contact me, and that's what's happening now. And I had somebody yesterday from the ACC talk to me. What's happening with the CFP era is that the CFP committee is demanded, similar to basketball about 10, 15 years ago, when the NCAA said, hey, go schedule a tough non-conference, and you could get in the NCAA. The same thing's happened in football with the CFP committee, and now they're saying, hey, you got 3 or 4 non-conference games. Go schedule somebody difficult in the Power 5. And even conferences have come up with, hey, guys, we have an agreement. We're going to schedule this way. We're not going to schedule any FCS. We're only going to schedule Power 5. And so that's helped us with this game because now it's demanded that they play a tougher non-conference schedule.
You mentioned the CFP. We're talking to Gary Stokan, the president and CEO of the Chick-Fil-A Peach Bowl. You guys are involved with that now. How does the GOAT, the opener, compare to what you got to do for the CFP or the bowl game that you're going to be putting on at the end of the year?
Great question. Last year we had the semi. We had Alabama number 1 against Washington number 4. It's a bowl game, so you have events all week, right? In a kickoff game, it's basically a business trip and away game. You get the team to come in the night before. We have a reception. We do provide the teams with tickets to the College Football Hall of Fame because there are kids that are playing in that game that are going to be inducted in that College Football Hall of Fame 10, 15, 20 years from now. So we want the kids to see it and aspire to be in the College Football Hall of Fame. And then for the fans, we also create a bowl-type atmosphere because the strategy and the vision was to create a game that would be the celebration of college football to kick off the season. And so whether we program the College Football Hall of Fame with the 2 teams playing in our game, we have our Home Depot Tailgate Town outside activities leading up to the game because the game's an 8 o'clock game. We have our Coca-Cola fan zone where the teams actually walk through, a pep rally with the bands and the cheerleaders and their fans in the Georgia World Congress Center. And then hopefully, it hadn't been announced, but hopefully we get game day, which would add to the festivities early in the morning. So you try and create a bowl-type atmosphere, but it's a much limited time. And then it's putting on a football game.
The Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl has generated $754 million since it started, or since 1998. Where do you see that number going, and do you see this eventually, in the next year or two or a couple of years being $1 billion thing for the city of Atlanta?
We've this year the 2 games in our Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, which will be our golden season, our 50th anniversary, believe it or not, will be played January 1st, leading into the Rose Bowl, which has the semifinal game. Those 3 games will produce over $100 million of economic impact, which really translates down into about $10 million of hard cash going back into the city and the state coffers, which when you think about the 3rd largest convention town in America, Atlanta, behind Las Vegas and Chicago, 4 of the top 5 conventions this year and are on an annual basis football games. The SEC Championship, the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, and the 2 Chick-fil-A Kickoff games will be 4 of the top 5 conventions in the 3rd largest convention town in America. So college football is so vital to, the economic impact of Atlanta, and that's one of the reasons why we think we're the college football capital of the world with the type of games that we have. Think about it. This year we'll have number 1 against number 2. Tennessee's probably going to be ranked top 25. Georgia Tech may be in the first weekend. Then the SEC Championship comes to town in December. Then the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, which we get 2 top 10 teams from the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. Then we'll have number 1 against number 2 in the national championship game a week later. So you're talking about probably 4 games that will have top 10 teams in them in our city in Mercedes-Benz Stadium in 1 year. So it's going to be the greatest season of college football in Atlanta football history.
You mentioned how the conventions, like college football dominates the conventions there. Here in Charlotte, we're trying to make that step here to host bowl games. I mean, we do the Belk Bowl, you do the ACC Championship, but they wanted a playoff game. They always talk about the Super Bowl coming here. They want that. What do you think, being from Atlanta, what do you think Charlotte needs to do to make that next step in order to be, we're always considered Little Atlanta, so how do we get to become, even with you guys?
I used to run the Atlanta Sports Council, and I used to run the and now run the bowl game. And now Will Webb runs the Sports Council and runs the bowl game. And behind Johnny Harris and Ken Haynes and Steve Luguire and all the guys in Charlotte here, they've created this Sports Council, which I think is important because you have to have an entity that has the partners between the CVB, between the corporate support to actually make the bids to get these things. So there needs to be a long-term strategy. Prior to having a sports commission, you didn't have a strategy. Now you have a strategy in place. So you went and got the ACC tournament or ACC championship. You got the ACC tournament. I'm sure there's other things that I'm not aware of that they're bidding on and getting to Charlotte. So I think that's what you've got to do. Have a vision, have a strategy. It's what we did for college football. We said, okay, we've got a passionate fan base of number 1, number 2 alumni bases in Atlanta of all the ACC and SEC schools. We have corporate support that is the underpinning of college football between Home Depot and Coca-Cola and Chick-fil-A and Napa and I can go on, Delta, I can go on and on with the corporate support we have. So we said, okay, how do we take those assets, bundle them into a marketing campaign? And we said, okay, let's go after the College Football Hall of Fame. Let's build the kickoff games. Let's go after the playoff. Let's go after the national championship game. And we've been successful in doing all that because there was a vision and strategy to do it from the beginning. And Will Webb and his team will do the same thing in Charlotte. There's no doubt about it.
Gary Stokan, the president CEO of the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, joining us here on the Carolina Sports Back. You mentioned your corporate sponsors, Chick-fil-A obviously being the title sponsor of the game. Are you guys entrenched with them for the foreseeable future? A lot of bowl games switch sponsorships. You and Chick-fil-A, are you guys going to be there for a while?
Yeah, I've been CEO and president of the bowl for 20 years, and Chick-fil-A has been our sponsor for 21 years. Second only to the Outback Bowl in longevity of title sponsorship. We created the kickoff game, and Chick-fil-A said, hey, we like that concept. We want to sponsor that. We created a golf tournament where the coaches, the Dave Dorans and the Larry Fedoras come down and play with an alumnus from the school. Larry plays with Roy Williams. They came down, and we created this tournament, and Chick-fil-A said, hey, we want to be involved in that. So they partner/sponsor. I hate the word sponsorship. They partner with us on our 3 events, and they've been integral into the growth of our success because not only who they are, but what they bring to the table. We meet on a monthly basis. I'm up here. I missed the meeting yesterday between my staff and their staff to talk about, okay, what are we doing for the kickoff game? How can we help you? How can you help us? And so it's really that partnership, win-win relationship that's been integral to our success.
True story. Growing up as a kid watching the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl on New Year's Eve, which I missed that New Year's Eve game.
Yeah.
But I didn't have Chick-fil-A in New York growing up. And someone asked me once, what was Chick-fil-A? I said, I don't know. They have a bowl game in Atlanta because I had no idea what Chick-fil-A was until I moved down into the South. So it just shows you how the branding, it works, across the nation, having it associated with you guys. But this year...
I'm going to use that.
I swear, it's a true story.
Here's another story related to that is when Dan Cathy, the CEO now, went out to San Diego when they started to look to branch out to the West Coast in California. He went and he said, I'm Dan Cathy with Chick-fil-A. And they said, what's Chick-fil-A? I know you guys, you have the bowl game.
Yep.
And that was his first acknowledgement of Chick-fil-A.
Well, my son asked me what Chick-fil-A was. I said, I don't know. It's a bowl game in Atlanta.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
That's what he did. But last one, I'm going to let you go. I know you got to make the rounds here. Mercedes-Benz Stadium, brand new, state-of-the-art. My son lives down in Atlanta, is telling me we got to come down for a Falcons game this year. He's a big Falcons fan. When the Panthers are there, how is that going to enhance this game and this experience?
Well, it already has. We wouldn't have won. Well, I think we'd have won a national championship game in the Georgia Dome, but we probably wouldn't have got a Super Bowl, which we have coming in 19. We wouldn't have got we may have got the Final Four, but we got the Final Four coming in 20. So, we go national championship game in 18, Super Bowl in 19, Final Four in 20. We wouldn't have had that without Arthur Blank. Give him all the credit in the world of putting $1.2 billion of his own money up to build this new stadium, which is, as you said, going to be state-of-the-art. A Jumbotron, what they're calling Halo board, is taller than Jerry Jones' board in Dallas, but it goes 360 degrees around the whole stadium. They're gonna charge $1.52 for a Coke, and you're gonna be able to get free refills. You're gonna buy a Chick-fil-A for $3.50 like you paid in the store. So they're not gonna mark up the food and beverage, which is,
huge.
Kind of amazing to think about, but Arthur wanted this to be an ultimate fan experience, and that's what it's going to be. It's going to be awesome.
7 weeks from tomorrow, Saturday, September 2nd, 8 o'clock, ABC, the greatest opener of all time, the 2017 Chick-fil-A kickoff game. And Gary, thanks for stopping by.
Thanks so much for having us.
It was a pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Enjoy the game and